This podcast was created to educate listeners on the experiences of diverse individuals. However, all opinions expressed by the host or guests do not reflect the overall standing of Tarleton Radio or Tarleton State University.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Making Space, a Diversity Dialogue. I'm your host, Cole, and this is a bi-weekly podcast where together we'll have questions answered about socially sensitive topics while learning how to create lasting relationships with diverse people. This episode will be focusing on Native Americans or Indigenous people, the recent terminology that is, and what it's like to be Indigenous in America today and what others can do to advocate for Indigenous people. I have my guest with me in studio today, which is really exciting. This is the first time in a long time we haven't been on Zoom. And she is also a Tarleton student and has previously worked with the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and International Programs, Abigail Horsley. Hello.
Hello.
Will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a senior here at Tarleton State. I am a history major, getting my teaching certification as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, gotta get that too.
Right. I mean, you're trying to educate people, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's a good podcast to come on if you're trying to educate people.
Yes, exactly. It works out perfectly. Just
write it on your resume.
Right, yeah. I did this and this.
Yes. All right. I think we're just going to jump right in. And can you explain or describe your personal identity as Indigenous or Native American?
So I'm part of the Choctaw tribe, which is now in Oklahoma. It was originally on the eastern part of the country, but now our nation is now in Oklahoma. So I tie a lot of home to there, a lot of things involved in that. I try to spend as much time as I can, proud of my heritage and showing how I can promote that to other people. I'm not afraid to, say, yes, I'm Native American. Yes, I'm Indigenous. Yes, I'm Choctaw. I know that there are some people who are out there and they're just like, I don't want to say it because, I don't want to seem like I'm whitewashing anything like that. And I'm just like, no, be proud of who you are. Don't be afraid of anything like that.
It's hard because when I was doing my research, I was looking at a lot of course, the reservations and how Indigenous people were separated and allotted certain spaces, but it was really all informed to try to assimilate Native Americans into like the white European culture.
Yeah, and I lived in California for quite some time as well. I've moved around a lot as a kid. So when we lived in California, it was really cool. Even though I was Choctaw, and that's, now based out of Oklahoma, in California, there's the Chumash, which is what the tribe we lived near. And so I could go to these missions, and I got to visit Santa Catalina Island, which there's a book kind of based off that area as well. And I got to see how the Native Americans were forced to live in these missions. And it was just so surreal, going to camps and going to visit every year at school, all about these missions and about what the Native Americans were going through and how they were just forced to colonize with the Europeans and, with the Spaniards out there and the Spaniards here in Texas. And then you get to the East Coast and all of, the British and the French and everything like that. It's crazy.
It is. And again, from the resources that I will definitely include in the description, folks that are listening, it talked a lot about how it's strange because you see a lot with the Black community, how it was very segregated, like make sure that it doesn't mix. And when you're looking at history with Indigenous people, it's very much so how it was encouraged. You should be more European, you should be Christian, you should be this, that, and the other, closer to what they thought was normal.
And it's so different that, with being, African American, you were forced to be so far away from everybody and you weren't allowed to do those things. And for a while, they were like, okay, well, since you're Native American or you're Indigenous, you need to be Christian. You need to be white passing almost.
Right.
There's no more of that. And so it's just so different how, they got not away with it or how they just got passed kind of over because they could pass as white.
Yes, it's interesting. It's a different dynamic there. And that's kind of leads into my next question. How does it feel and how does it affect you as a student being in a primarily, I want to say white, but I mean, of course, it's just like of European descent students. How does that affect you in your identity, being a student here where it's primarily just people who are white and of European descent that don't really know much, honestly, about Native American Indigenous people?
It's very different because growing up in California, I had those other tribes or other people who, kind of knew the same thing, like the Shumash. I was able to kind of relate to kids who were that. And then I lived in Kansas, and I was about one other kid in the whole school besides my siblings who were Native American. And so it's very hard now coming to college, and there's no group for us. There's not like anything on campus for us, really. And I mean, I'm very grateful that I did the diversity dialogue in 2019. Right. I'm so glad that got me into such great contacts. I've met some wonderful professors and friends from that. And so now I'm just like, okay, where else can I use my voice? So trying to find something, and I don't have much time left here at Tarleton. And so I kind of feel stuck on what I can do and how I can put myself out there to advocate and support Indigenous people.
Do you have an idea of how you're going to do that outside of college yet, or?
The Choctaws have supported me through so much with everything going on through COVID and everything. They've supported me through college. They have a higher education program, and they've supported my family my entire life. That I plan to give back to the Choctaws, especially with everything that they've done for me. And I'm so very grateful for everything, that I want to be able to give another, a Native American child the same opportunities I've got to. I've, basically went through my first 2 years of college debt-free because of all the support I had. And I want to be able to, a lot of these kids are coming from lower income, and I want to be able to support them the way that I was supported. And so I definitely want to start either a foundation or, something, a scholarship or donate something to anybody who wants to support, Native Americans in any way.
Right. That's great. That's amazing. It helps so much for people to donate, and that's not me trying to tell you to go out and donate, but it's certainly a good cause, and there are a lot of good causes that donation works for. Let's go to a little bit of a terminology question associated with Native American people and Indigenous people. So can you kind of explain the difference, if you know the difference between using the term Native American versus Indigenous, and maybe why that's important?
Yes. So Native American, a lot of people use that with the history of the America, the name, in that Spanish, I believe he was Spanish, the guy who came over, yes, Americano or whatever his last name was. I'm completely blanking on it.
That's okay. It's not a history podcast.
It's not a history podcast. Thanks. But they were there beforehand, and that's where you get that native from, is because they were originally here. And so I personally try to use Indigenous people if I can. I know that it's a slip of tongue because we're changing with the times. A lot about the name, just like with instead of Latino, you're using Latinx. Right. And so we're trying to change with that time. There's the occasional, you slip of the tongue where you use Native American, but I don't think it's derogatory in any way or anything like that, like using, Redskins or something of that sort.
Right.
But, I mean, it's just, I want to say it's personal preference.
Okay.
To a point. I don't see it as offensive as somebody, had said, hey, are you Native American? I wouldn't say that as offensive. I mean, maybe I would say, hey, we're called Indigenous people now. That's kind of that.
So do you think for listeners out there, maybe starting to use Indigenous over Native American would be important?
Especially because, they went away with Columbus Day, and they put it as Indigenous Day, not
Indigenous
Native American
Day. Right. That's good. Okay. All right. Let's take another kind of term question. Can you describe what a nation is versus maybe a tribe, or why we would use those terms in different places?
So a tribe I would see more as like Navajo, or not necessarily but like a closer knit. There's a lot of people who can claim that that they are when they're not. And so tribe is kind of like a family thing. So, I mean, there's not a lot of Navajo nowadays. So I would use tribe as that. Nation, I mean, there's plenty of nations in Oklahoma. You have the Chickasaw, you have Choctaw, there's Cherokee. Those kind of have a form of government. So we have like a president, like our head council kind of thing. And so that would be the difference.
So the distinction there is like if they have if that nation has a form of government.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of like the difference with reservations as well. Like Oklahoma doesn't have reservations. It's all just you have 10.5 counties that are Choctaw land.
I see.
So we wouldn't say like, I live in the 10.5 counties. I live in the nation. I don't live on the reservation.
I see. Can the nation be part of the reservation, or is it distinct that way? So there's definitely reservations versus a nation.
I think there's definitely reservations versus the nations.
Okay.
The way that I see it, I mean, everybody may see it differently. But like
it's hard to generalize
exactly.
a humongous group of people.
Like in New Mexico, you don't see nations, you see the reservations. So I think there's just a little bit of a separation between the two.
Okay, so when you're talking about you grew up on a nation, it's not what you think of as the government allotted this to Indigenous people back in the early 1900s, 1800s.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let me look at my questions here. We talked about a little bit about tribe, and is that something that we should be using the word, or should we switch to using nation, or?
I think it depends on the place you're looking at. I can really only speak for Choctaws as I am. And so, I mean, say that our sister, the Chickasaws, they want to start using tribe. Well, we should respect that and use what they want. So, I mean, it can be used. You just don't see it a lot nowadays.
Right.
It's just not one of the common words among a lot of people.
Okay. Well, thinking about tribe, there's in the media and in a lot of, I would say, like fashion, I guess, there's a lot of appropriation of that word. Can you kind of describe your feelings and like what cultural appropriation means to you?
That's a hard one, of course.
It is hard. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, cultural appropriation, respect the heritage. I'm not going to go around, with a feathered, headdress, because that's not something that was, it was mainly used for like people of high standards. I'm not going to go running around with one. Or there's, pictures of like tattoos and stuff. And there's a difference between not understanding and misusing the culture and like the heritage and those kinds of things, and understanding and appreciating it.
Right.
And so it all just depends on that as well. Like, I'm not going to go confront somebody because I see them wearing a headdress and be like, you shouldn't be wearing that. That's, cultural appropriation. But say that they had, came out and said, hey, I don't understand this. Can you explain this to me? And I'm like, okay, well, as Choctaws, we see it as this.
Okay.
Other tribes, they allow women to wear it. Women can wear it there. It just depends. I see a lot of the Pocahontas outfits.
Yes, the costumes.
Yes, the costumes. The costumes kill me. They internally just, they don't sit right. It's not something that was worn. It's not something that should be seen as worn. I'm very, glad that the Washington went away with their name tag of the Redskins. Yes. Now they're Washington State or Washington football. So I'm glad that they went away with that. I'm a Chiefs fan, so I don't
Yeah.
see much wrong with using the name Chiefs. I think it's a great honor to use that name. And yes, it goes into, not something that's traditionally used or, in a Native American, Indigenous person setting. But I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that name. I think they use it in a good manner.
Okay.
So it just really depends on how you feel about it as well. I mean, mainly, my main thing is, like, my biggest pet peeve is, like, the outfits.
So like what is it? Is it boho that usually?
Yes.
That quote unquote boho style
Yes,
is
it's
usually
like the big headdresses and
the hats, which I didn't know. Apparently, so I'm sorry I didn't know this, but I was looking through like TikTok, of course. Of course, that's gotten very popular, and
Yes.
some Indigenous videos started popping up, and then the hats, the wide brimmed kind of round hats. I did not know that was based in Indigenous culture, a certain nation, I think. That was crazy. I didn't know there were so many things that style has taken on.
It's very crazy. And, living in Texas is always cowboys versus Indians.
Right.
There's schools
Right.
that are like, their mascots are the Indians and stuff like that. So, I don't see necessarily, it's not the greatest name for
Right.
a school mascot to be
Yep.
an Indian.
Yeah.
But also, I'm very glad that they're not wearing headdresses when they have their pep rallies or anything. I haven't
That's
seen
true.
that. So
that's true.
we're taking one step at a time here.
Right. So, what would you tell listeners who may want to appreciate that sort of culture, in that way? What should they go about doing if they want to purchase things like that?
I would definitely say research.
Okay.
Find somebody within that nation. Look up their, I wouldn't say background, but like look up who they are. I find a lot of online through Twitter, I love the Navajo beads, and I don't want to buy fake ones. I want to buy from somebody real.
Yeah.
I want to buy like real moccasins, and I know that those are pricey. I'm not going to go buy like a $20 pair when I know that I can get a nice pair for, I'm going to drop a couple $100 on it, unfortunately.
Right.
And so I'm very, very grateful that my aunt makes dresses. And so she's making me we're going to be working together this summer on a ceremonial dress for graduation for me.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And I'm so excited because my aunt, her husband is Chickasaw, and that's like a sister tribe to us. So all of my cousins are Chickasaw. And I've watched growing up them, be all dressed and all fancy, and I've never had my own dress, and I've watched them go to powwows and participate, but I've never had my own dress or anything, so I haven't been able to actually participate in what's going on in the activities inside. I've been to them multiple times, but I've never actually got to be in a Choctaw.
Is that like an age thing or?
No, it's
a choice.
It's just a choice. I've just never had a dress. They're kind of pricey to make.
Right.
I'm very, very grateful my aunt has like offered to help me. Like, I'm going to purchase it all. She's going to help me sew it.
Wow, that's
all
really
of that
cool.
kind of stuff. Love her for that. It's going to be so nice. I'm so excited. But
that is amazing.
It's just price wise. I haven't made one completely.
Okay.
But
yeah, so try to research the people who make them. Yeah,
Yes.
So research your purchases, especially if they have any sort of what seems to be Indigenous kind of culture related to it. Even a lot of the patterns I've seen recently, especially in blankets and shirts and stuff, just recognize that may be from someone else's culture, and maybe you should get that and support the people who are actually of that culture. Definitely. Okay, so this is kind of a term that maybe not a lot of the listeners will recognize, but once we get through like what the idea of it is, you might recognize. Could you explain blood quantum a little bit and what your thoughts are about it?
Yes. So blood quantum is the degree of how much of a certain race that you can prove.
Okay.
So with Indigenous people, with the Dawes rolls, you had to go sign up. and you had to
Right.
say how much you were. So if you were full, if you were half, if you were a quarter, whatever. And honestly, it was hard for them. A lot of them lied on the rolls
Okay.
because ended up, if you said that you were more, you were going to be moved.
I see.
And so that's kind of how a lot of people ended up on, Trail of Tears as well. And that's how kind of we moved into Oklahoma and that area, is because of the blood quantum. You got to get out and move. We're originally from Choctaw, Alabama.
Okay.
We're now in Oklahoma. How does that
Right.
happen?
Right.
And so you got moved based on your blood quantum. I can go back and trace it exactly who in my family line was on that roll and who signed it, which I think is awesome.
That is incredible.
So, I mean, if you even think that you remotely, go find it. Go look it up, I get it from my mother's side, but on my father's side, they, we strongly believe that there was some, but they never went and signed the rolls. So we can't prove it on that side because there was no, proof. And that's why you have Eastern bands of certain, nations or certain tribes at that time. So, like, we have an Eastern band of Cherokee. You have an Eastern band of Choctaw. And they're not regulated like the same with nations because they didn't sign any rolls or anything. There's
Right. There's no federal
legal
allotments of funds or land or anything like that. Interesting. So I've heard a lot of things like, now this isn't research based. This is just like things that I've heard of, but that certain maybe nations or even reservations won't allow people to move on that set of land without a certain percentage.
I would say it depends
Okay.
on who. I know that the Cherokee are a little bit more strict on who can get what. Because they're just a lot more stricter, I would say.
Okay.
So, like, Choctaws and, like, Chickasaws are pretty relaxed on their, like, blood quantum. If you have something, we're going to be there for you. I would not say that's the same for, like, Navajo or anybody, especially not for Cherokee. And I know that's one of the biggest tribes, too, out there. But, anybody can say that they're anything.
Right.
And not have proof to back it up. Or if they do have the proof, like, you need to make sure that you're signed up within that nation, tribe, or whatever to get something.
Okay.
So it depends on where you are, because we're very relaxed, and, if you have even a little bit, we're going to accept you no matter what.
Right. Okay. What do you feel the biggest issue is for Indigenous folks in society today?
I think the biggest issue today is whitewashing and cultural appropriation, for sure. There's anybody can be anything. They can say that they're something that they're not. And so I think that's, like, the biggest thing, is one of the biggest things is, you see people be like, oh, well, I'm Native American. And they convince themselves and they convince other people when they're really not. And so we get this, like, misrep as well of, like, oh, well, everybody's saying that they're related to Pocahontas or something. Or there's a thing called the Cherokee Princess Syndrome.
Okay.
And it's where people, say that they're a Cherokee, like, their grandma was a Cherokee princess. And they go in this, like, tandem of just saying we're Native American, but, like, they have no proof to back it up. They haven't done their own research or anything, and they just say it because that's what they were told by parents or grandparents.
Right.
And so I think that's part of it. And then just cultural appropriation, like the headdresses and the outfits and stuff like that. Like, it really does.
It's very popularized, especially in the media.
And, I mean, also, you look at TV shows and look how trashy the reservations are and look how trashy nations are. That's not, like, the truth. There might be, you look at shows like Yellowstone and they make the reservation look like complete and utter trash. Like, they are underfunded and they need to be funded. And, there's a sense of community there that they don't put in, like, the shows. Everybody has each other's back and everybody's going to support everybody. And that's not something that you see. You see, always fights with, other people, or there's casinos and they make everybody big and bad within the casino and stuff like that. And I'm like, well, the casinos really do help us. Right. That's where a lot of money comes from, is the casinos, because there's people who are willing to spend that money to fund us.
So have you, this may seem like a very insensitive question, but since this is the show for it, have you been to a reservation? Could you say what it's like? And I know you mentioned the nations and the counties. Are they like everywhere else? Would you say it's more low income?
I would say reservations are very low income. It just depends. I mean, it's very underfunded. I've been to a few and driven through quite a few between, like, New Mexico and Arizona. It's sad. It's sad to see, like, rundown houses, and those are what people are living in. Or, the trailer houses that are falling on one side. Like, people are living in those still today, and that's how they're going to, support their family. And a lot of the time I see, oh, well, you can just leave the reservation. Like, you can get off the res, or you can leave. And I'm like, those people don't really have a choice. They have a family to support.
Right.
And that stinks for them, is they don't want to leave their family because there's such a sense of family importance and community within Indigenous people, because we don't really have anybody else. We're here to support each other.
Right.
And so I think it stinks and it sucks that, from the outside looking into a point where I'm very grateful for the way that I was raised and very grateful for the things that I have, that these other people didn't get the option. I'm raised in a very loving household. My mom, on the other hand, where, I get my heritage from, was not raised in a very loving household. My mom was adopted out because
I see.
There wasn't anything great for her. And so, we get this bad rep because a lot of these kids are, put into foster care and stuff like that.
Yeah. What could listeners do to advocate for Indigenous folks or help better understand Indigenous people?
Support your friends. Always just be there, be behind them. I mean, it's the same with, like, I've written papers over, like, the AIM movement, and I see just the support from other people that they had brought in. So I just want to say, if you're going to advocate, you need to, have a backup. You need that support system to advocate. I'm very grateful for the friends and family that I have that are going to support me 100% of the time. Coming on the show, or they're going to support me if I decide to do something a little risky, and be, more involved in something. I would say, if you believe in something, support it.
Right.
Go out for it. I'm very grateful that I was part of that diverse dialogue, and that created such a support system with me and some of my professors and people's classes I have joined. Not even, not anything to do with my degree. I've just taken their classes because they were such a support to me after, I had that dialogue.
Right.
And they came, they had so many questions for me, and they were so willing and ready to learn. That's also a big thing, is, like, be ready to learn something different.
Okay.
My best friend and my roommate, she is, her family is, like, Czech and German, and so we've talked about things like, she's like, okay, well, what's different for you guys and what's different for me? And I'm like, okay, we're comparing the two. I'm supporting her. I want to understand, so I'm not doing this wrong. Or it's the same with religion, because a lot of Native Americans and Indigenous people are, Christian now.
Right, of course.
We don't focus a lot on, older, I guess, religion.
Older belief systems.
Older belief systems. And so, you know, I'm going to out myself here. One time I pronounced lint or spelt lint the wrong way. And my best friend is Lutheran, and she, you know, miscorrected me like, hey, this is the way that it's, you know, pronounced.
Actually, yeah.
And I'm like, or it's spelled. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like so sorry. I did not realize that I did that. Like, thank you for letting me know.
Right.
And I have fixed it ever since. So it's just, you know, you gotta, there's mistakes that can and will be made, but you just gotta learn from those mistakes and be okay that you are going to make those mistakes.
Okay. And how would you tell listeners who maybe have someone that they know or have a friend who's Indigenous approach maybe certain questions that they have and maybe that weren't answered on this show, but if they have questions about the culture or the heritage, how would they go about asking those to people?
I would say try to be insensitive. Sometimes those questions just aren't. Like, I've had, you know, the few questions of what do you do about adoption, or what do you do about being in a different state from the nation, or how does that affect you? And I mean, really, it's just you have to be okay with answering those hard questions.
Okay.
And as like the learner, you have to be okay with hard answers. Not everybody can explain everything. Not everybody's going to have that knowledge, unfortunately. There's so many different, you know, nations, tribes, places. And it's just it's such a broad world, and it's such a broad
truly is
thing to be able to undiscover all of it. Because there are so many different things within, you know, Texas or Oklahoma or, you know, Kansas and up compared to California, New Mexico, and Arizona. There's just so many different Indigenous people within that nobody's going to be the same. Everybody's going to be different, and that's okay.
Are there any topics we didn't cover that you wanted to share with people who are looking to learn about this sort of thing?
I wouldn't say topics. I would just say just be open to learning and being okay to understand that, you know, there's going to be such different things in life compared to, you know, European things. You know, as Indigenous people, we kind of seem to be looked down upon and things in life, unfortunately. So just be willing to be there for us as we, you know, rise from the ashes of everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a lot more upcoming, the talk of Indigenous people, especially within, you know, mainly a lot of it's focused in Oklahoma. Well, now many other states are starting to open up and talk about it.
That's good.
And so
I hope that continues.
I think it's awesome how, you know, a lot of it was shushed out of the southern states for such a long time. And now that it's slowly opening back up and more people are talking about it, I think it's awesome. Because a lot of them only focus it on just California, you know, and then you just have Oklahoma, or you have the northeastern, you know, up in the northeast, and no one else is really talked about. But I'm like, there are so many other places that have had these Indigenous people for such a long time that they're not talked about. Because you go to, you know, the Four Corners, and you can do a drive through there and go look at what they left, what these Indigenous people had left in the rocks. And I've done that before with my family, and I think that's the coolest thing.
That is amazing.
So be okay with going out and exploring the museums that they have. If you see, you know, anything that looks remotely cool, because, you know, a lot of people pick up arrowheads and they think that's the coolest thing. I'm like, okay, well, go get in a museum and go look at what they have there.
Right.
It's so awesome, the history that can be shown.
Okay, well, thank you for coming on. I think we're going to close up with that. That was amazing. I hope you listeners enjoyed that as well. Of course, we went over a lot of information, and there's still plenty of material out there, so just do your research, like Abby talked about, really do your research on maybe what you want to buy, especially if you really like that style, if you're going to kind of go with that theme. But also do your research about the history, because I read like just a few articles and I'm truly amazed at what happened, especially during the time of when reservations were being allotted and things like that. It's very interesting, and it's not easy. It's not easy to read whatsoever, but I think it's important for everyone to know. If you have someone who is Indigenous, you know them, or you have a friend, really, really be supportive is all that I think they're asking for, is being supportive and really stepping back and helping them raise their voice too. So if you'd like to know more about that kind of stuff, I'm gonna put some resources in the description, maybe get a few more for you guys. And if there's something that I didn't cover that you were curious about, don't hesitate to send us a message on our Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Planet 100.7, the radio station we're based out of. But until next time, be safe out there, folks, and take care.
This has been a Tarleton Radio Network podcast with production from me, Taylor Welch.
And me, Carissa Cole.
Find more great shows by searching Tarleton Radio Network wherever you get your podcasts.